Chose the wrong setting. Great. All right, let's give folks a couple more minutes to join and then I'll kick us off in just a minute or so. Thank you for joining this afternoon and we're glad to have you here for this final session of our RISE community today. Oh. Okay, it seems like we are all set. Okay, let's see who else we've got on the line. We've got about 20 people in the meeting. Let's give it another minute or so for folks to get on the line. Great. And Rebecca, just to confirm it, I just want to make sure because it's switched. So are you recording on your end?
No.
Oh, okay. It's showing to me that you do have recording on. Like it's a
Recording's
little
on the
cloud.
cloud.
Hold on, give me one moment. I'm having a little bit of a Zoom issue on my end. Great. Okay, so I think we are ready to go. Thanks everyone for joining, and we are in the session 3, which is our third and final session of the lessons learned and common questions on facilitating pre-ETS session for the past, present, and future of Centers for Independent Living, facilitating pre-employment transition services, or pre-ETS. This session today runs from 2 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time and is going to be facilitated by our expert facilitator, Troy Hall from Able, South Carolina. Just as a quick reminder, my name is Megan Ketchel and I am the project manager for the Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center. And Troy, we can go to the next slide. So for accommodations today, we have captioning enabled in the Zoom, and you can also adjust the font size for that caption as well in the Zoom, and you can access those at the link provided also. We did not have any ASL requests for today, so there's no ASL interpretation. Just a reminder, these are interactive sessions, and we hope that you participate actively today, whether that's verbally, chat, or on video, whatever you're able to do, we greatly appreciate it. And we know that these sessions are most interesting and most beneficial to all of you when you have the opportunity to connect with your peers and our facilitator, Troy Hall. And we can go to the next slide. And Troy, I'll turn it over to you to pick it up from here to go over our agenda.
All right, everyone. Great to see and hear from y'all. Sadly, this is our last session together, but I think it's going to be really useful. After some quick introductions, we're going to be exploring some lessons from the field. So these are just best practices that are kind of backed up by data that should be guideposts for how y'all are going to be implementing your transition and pre-ETS services. And then we're going to go over some of the feedback that y'all have provided through the surveys you've been doing at the end of sessions, some best practices and some questions. And then this last section is when we're going to be talking about questions and answers. That's going to be the bulk of the session. This is also going to be time for y'all to jump in with questions as they come to mind. I'll say it when we get there again, but no question too big, no question too small. I'm happy to throw in my 2 cents, obviously, but this is also a wonderful community. So if y'all have answers to each other's questions, that's kind of the big purpose of this last session. And then we're going to close out and talk about next steps and other resources. So this is session 3, like Megan said, lessons learned and common questions. So a reminder, hi everyone, Troy Hall. I'm the Director of Youth Transition Programs way down in Able, South Carolina. And we are gonna go ahead and kick it off. But before
I think I just wanted to do a quick audio check. Are folks able to hear Troy okay, or?
Not well.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you're able to turn your mic volume up a little bit, Troy, or thank you.
This is the captioner. Yeah, Troy, you're a little bit kind of quiet. Just a little quiet, maybe switch muffled.
All right, let's get this. How is this? Is this any better? No.
And it's the wrong way.
All right, let's see. Anything? Any better? Yes, no?
We actually get like sort of like a buzzing sound with that, Troy. Sorry, I don't know if you want to just try to speak up, maybe?
All right, I'm just gonna try a couple of options, y'all. So thumbs up, thumbs down, this is not working. Okay.
It sounds a little better to me, but I don't know if it's just that I have my volume up on my computer. If folks are able to turn your volume up on your own, I recommend that, but
This is the captioner. It does sound a little bit better to me also.
Sorry, y'all. Thanks for your patience. Let's see. All right, I'm seeing a little bit better. I'm gonna just one more thing. Is this any different? How are we feeling? Yes, no, thumbs up, tiny bit better. I'd hate for y'all to not be able to hear well. Okay.
That sounds a lot clearer, Troy.
Okay. I have no idea what I did. I just clicked a bunch of buttons till something worked slightly better. So that's my foolproof troubleshooting method for computers. To start off with, we are going to talk about some lessons from the field, some best practices. So these are sort of data-based best practices, things that we have found work best when we are implementing these pre-employment transition services. Okay, so we're just going to go over each of these broad pre-ETS categories and then talk about how we know that these services are robust, what's going to lead to them being the most effective. And by effective, I mean that it's going to be the most effective to the widest range of people, regardless of disability, and that it most likely results in employment. So we're going to start by talking about work-based learning. So when we're thinking about work-based learning, or WBL, if you see that on the screen, there are a few things that it should focus on. One is that work-based learning opportunities should focus on practical and timely skill building. So this can be really challenging when service providers are trying to find accurate work-based learning experiences. It can be really easy to fall into a pattern of doing what is the easiest thing available, or the service that's most available, or perhaps the partner that is the easiest to coordinate with, but maybe the opportunities that they're offering are not really timely or practical skills. So if you have sites in your area that are offering work-based learning that might be really retail focused, we're thinking about stocking or shelving or working a point of sale system, but those opportunities aren't really in your area, or they aren't what your consumers are looking for, then that's not really going to be focusing on practical and timely skills. So we do want, even in work-based learning settings, to focus on skills that are going to be in line with interests and abilities and opportunities. We want these WBLs to be valuable for career exploration as well. So while there are specific pre-ETS dedicated just to career exploration, we also want to leverage work-based learning experiences to also fall in line with that, which means that even though these WBLs can be used to build skills, we also want to give them to sort of make them work double duty, and to also give them a chance to explore different skills. We should also focus on finding work-based learning that's going to provide real-world experience. So work-based learning can become dated really quickly. It can become very disconnected from the work world that young people go out and find themselves entering into. So we want to try and make sure, if we're offering these services, that they're going to stay up to date and relevant as much as possible. I also know that these things are very easy to do. So these are practices we might sometimes fall short of just because of the way resources are, but these are the things that we should be aiming for. We have also seen a lot of students with disabilities, they kind of lack these robust work-based learning opportunities. Sometimes, if this is, I'm down in South Carolina, we are very rural. We have some great resources, but we don't have a lot of great resources that reach a wide variety, which means that there's competition for some of these resources. And what we've seen sometimes is that youth with disabilities, especially youth with the highest support needs, they're not always prioritized with these work-based learning experiences. So it is up to us and for those individuals to try and advocate for their place in utilizing these resources. We also know that work-based learning works best in collaboration. So this is something where a vocational rehabilitation agency obviously has a huge part in, but also there's an opportunity for schools to play a role in this, and for Centers for Independent Living to be advocates to provide that professional development to make sure that that site is following these best practices. Okay. So let's think about job exploration, right? Job exploration as a pre-ETS, we know that this pre-ETS service, even though there are plenty of ways to do this in a group setting, this does have to be individualized, right? This is where a lot of youth with disabilities are going to require some very direct support, some very individualized services. And so that might be something to consider when you're thinking about staffing, kind of balancing between when we can do those group activities and when we're allowed to do, or only have the resources to do more one-on-one style work, and making sure that we're leveraging our partners for that as well, right? Job exploration is especially different for younger people. So a lot of VR staff, they approach some vocational rehabilitation staff. They approach job exploration very differently with young people than they do with people who have established histories of work, right? Because young people are also going to want to explore lots of different options. They're also going to be interested in a lot of options that are not in line with their skills, interests, and abilities. It might just be sort of a hobby or something they're interested in. So when we're looking at job exploration for young people, with and without disabilities, we know that it's going to be more of trying on a bunch of different hats and seeing what fits. Whereas with traditional, more adult-oriented job exploration, it might be focusing very specifically on very narrow career paths because you have a whole history of work to look back on. So when we're thinking about best practices for job exploration, we want to really prioritize those individualized services. We want to focus on our youth interests, abilities, skills. We also want to be mindful of culture. We want to be mindful of what are the support needs of that youth. We know that jobs can be incredibly flexible and adaptable, and it's also our job to teach employers how to support people with disabilities. But there's also just going to be some field
Yes.
where support needs
So I was just calling,
are
more
more difficult to.
I was talking with somebody and they
Excuse
were
me, sorry,
kind of
Troy, one
concerned
second. We're
about
getting
you.
some background noise from someone's line. Okay, there, I think we got them muted. Thank you. Go ahead.
So keeping these services very individualized and giving people opportunities to explore lots of different things. We also know that this is just one piece that's going to be greatly integrated into other pre-ETS. It can be very tempting from a service provider perspective to break these pre-ETS into step-by-step 1, 2, 3 chunks that become very isolated from each other. But we know that this is a spectrum of services. This is kind of a continuum. People are going to explore services and then go back to other pre-ETS. They're going to go back to skill building. They're going to go back to building work readiness skills and then revisit job exploration, right? So this isn't directly a step 1, step 2 path. This is something that people are going to cycle in and out of and go back and forth from. So that's why it's really important to stay plugged in as a team of providers. That's one of the reasons that I kind of harp on this whole connection between VR and CILs in schools, is because we don't want to see ourselves as handing off, okay, we've done this part, now it's your job to do this part. We know that this plan can be sometimes cyclical, and we have to work with each other to fill in those gaps. When we're looking at post-secondary education counseling as a pre-ET, so PSE, we want to make sure that the PSE that we're offering, especially ones that we are focusing on, are going to be in line with that career exploration. They're going to be in line with the student skills that they've shown through building that self-advocacy, through building those work readiness skills. So we want to make sure that it's very relevant to the specific youth. While it's important that youth are exposed to a whole slew of post-secondary options, we want to make sure that we can kind of guide them to an option that's going to be most relevant. I also kind of like to get on my soapbox just a minute with these services and to make sure that we are kind of normalizing and affirming the importance of post-secondary training, college, technical college, just continued skill building. We don't want to fall into a pattern where we're saying one is better than the other, obviously. But I have seen, and I'm sure all of y'all have seen, in fact, I'd love to hear it in the chat if you have, where teachers or professionals can sometimes make the choice for youth that they don't need post-secondary education counseling. Where the reality is that even if they have a very specific job goal, youth really need to know what options are out there for education, even if that's not maybe their immediate option, because a lot of times it's very easy for this process to work relatively quickly to get youth into an entry-level job, but that's not always someone's career. right? It's going to take more education, more knowledge, more advancements to eventually get to a point in your career that really aligns with your goals. Post-secondary education is a foundational pillar of that. We don't want youth with disabilities to miss out on that because perhaps we've made a mistake and we have assumed capability at some point, or we have assumed because there's minimal resources, or quite frankly, perhaps there's an ideological assumption that we don't want to expose certain youth to the idea of a college or a university because maybe that's not something that they immediately have the skills to do, or it's not specifically in line with their interests. And so we just want to kind of cut people off from that knowledge altogether. The reality is we do want to share these resources. We do want to speak frankly about post-secondary education. That also means we want to speak frankly about the realities of it, the costs of it, and the fact that it takes a certain set of skills that you have to build to go through specific training programs. And so if a youth has identified a career that's really reliant on a 4-year university, but they have not built up the skills to be successful in that environment yet, we need to be really frank with them about that. And that doesn't always mean saying no to a career option. Sometimes that means being really realistic about the skills that you have to build in order to take the next step, and it's breaking that step into a lot of smaller parts. But we don't want to make the mistake of simply not having that conversation or not exposing people to those services. And sometimes it's a little bit of an uphill battle for that. Yeah, and then there is a service cutoff. Yeah, Amber, I see your comment. Oh, and Donna, like you were saying. Yes, absolutely. That's also, again, why we rely on each other within this network, because a lot of times we can look outside of those traditional resources that might be cut off by age or some sort of financial limitation, and there's a smaller community resource that fills that gap. Okay. When we think about work readiness training, work readiness is another pre-ETS category that's been historically very difficult for young people with disabilities, especially young people with higher support needs. Individuals with disabilities usually need to spend a lot of time preparing for work because they need to learn about their disability, need to learn about what accommodations work for them, and learn how to request those accommodations in a work setting. Any youth is rarely going to be prepared for work. When I think about my first job or a couple of jobs that I had, man, I really could have benefited from a lot more training to be successful in that. Sometimes youth without disabilities they have the ability to make more mistakes in these early parts of their career that they're able to then sort of move past, whereas young people with disabilities don't always get that option because there's limited resources. And so that means we need to spend a lot of time building up this work readiness skill as part of pre-ETS. We want to make sure that once youth have a baseline of skills, that we are then also giving them those other opportunities. We're taking those work readiness skills, and now, perhaps as they're continually building them, we're also placing them in that work-based learning opportunity. We're also talking to them about job counseling. We're also then planning for them to go into that next step of a certain, maybe a job carved position or an entry-level position, right? My big takeaway from this is we know that work readiness skills, it can be very intensive to build those skills up for a lot of youth. We want to spend the energy to do that, but we don't want to keep people so long in this cycle of practicing or learning skills in abstract that we don't prioritize letting them practice those skills in work settings. We also want to make sure that the training is aligning with their preference, with their skills, interests, and abilities. Sometimes when we think about soft skills training, we can be there might be a default idea that we instantly fall back to as these are the things that someone needs to do in order to be successful at work. But that's going to vary field to field, right? That's going to vary depending on what the youth is really going to focus on. So are we going to spend up a lot of time and resources building a youth's customer service skills? If they're interested in going into a job that does not revolve around customer service or have a lot of customer service aspects, just because that's what historically we consider traditional work readiness skills, right? So we want to make sure that we are giving someone a wide breadth, but we're also tailoring this to be focused on the specific individual. Okay. I apologize for the turn. I've got my monitor set up differently today. The big one is obviously self-advocacy, and as Centers for Independent Living, this is the one that we're going to focus on. But these seeds are strewn throughout all of these other pre-ETS services as well. CILs are obviously, as I've said, uniquely equipped to deliver these sort of self-advocacy lessons. And we also know that the most effective self-advocacy tools, they come from peer mentoring. They come from peer-led peer mentoring. Youth are going to listen to someone who has similar lived experiences, who comes from a similar background, who's around a similar age, more so than they're going to listen to a professional who might be much more removed from their life experience. So, and I'm specifically talking about a disability identity, but also just being someone closer in age is a lot more impactful. I also know that setting up a peer-led program is very labor intensive. It changes a lot. It involves rotating a lot of staff in and out. It involves investing in a lot of staff who ultimately might not be staying with your program, right? It is a little more intensive, but we also know that the outcome is more effective. So when we're thinking about navigating self-advocacy, we also want to tie that directly into disability identity, disability pride, and accommodations. And we want to make sure that as our Center for Independent Living, we're relying on that foundation of the IL philosophy to guide our teaching of self-advocacy. Okay. We had a breakout session. I think we're actually kind of looking at the group, and especially knowing that some people don't have as much personnel for this. We are going to pivot a little bit, and we're going to talk about. I'm actually, and Megan, I'm going to go a little bit off script. I'm going to hold this and keep these discussion questions more toward the end when we're talking about open-ended questions. So, as a reminder, I can talk to a brick wall all day, but there's a lot of amazing brain power in the room. So I want y'all to practice a little vulnerability, bring up some of the questions you have, even if you think maybe I'm the only person with this question or everybody else knows this and I'm the only one who doesn't. Whatever your question might be, I'd love for you to really challenge yourself and bring it forward for the group. And also, if you hear a question that you can have feedback on, I'd really love to hear that feedback. But for this structure, I'm going to hold this until a little bit later on. I say all that to say, be thinking of questions. All right. With that said, I want to go over a little bit about some of the feedback that yourself and other cohorts have provided on best practices for CILs providing pre-ETS. So I just talked a little bit about the best practices that we've seen that's been backed up by data that my Center for Independent Living has been able to use over the years. This is some more feedback that y'all have provided to each other and that other professionals have provided. One is to make sure you are establishing a strong connection with vocational rehabilitation counselors, SPED coordinators, teachers on the ground, just immediate school staff. The connections that your staff is able to make with those professionals really does play into the success of the youth that you work with. It is having those relationships with the people who are providing those services on the front line is really going to make it a lot easier for y'all to know what do the youth you're working with need, what's the biggest barrier they're running into, how are their plans changing, how do we need to adapt services. That's really all going to come from those intimate conversations you have with partners. I realize that that can be a real big ask if there is 2 of you at a CIL who's in charge of all of the youth programs and you have a whole state to serve, or however that may break down. But especially as you grow, you want to make sure that you're continuing to prioritize those individual relationships. Regular meetings with partners, regular meetings with other CILs, even if your service areas don't overlap, still keeping in mind what are they doing, what practices are working, what resources have they found. Keeping in contact is going to be one of the best ways to make sure you're providing those quality services. There is a great quote that I'm just going to read directly. Don't give up, continue reaching out to schools with your information. We started in one school and now receive requests from others. It takes persistence, but it works. I think I shared last time that we started out with 1 part-time staff member who I think was working with 5 schools, and now we've got a team of, I think we're down to 10 right now, but we're serving 40 plus schools, between 1,500 and 2,000 students, right? But that's all been over the course of 6 years. So we started small. A lot of y'all are going to be starting small, but it takes time and it grows. And then making sure that you are advocating for your CIL's unique value. The benefit of working at an agency like a CIL is that a lot of times they're not as big. They're a little smaller. They're a little more intimate. You're able to really get a sense of the mission of your work and the unique strengths that everyone brings to the table. You're very much philosophy driven. And so really tying yourself to that and making sure that continues to guide your work is definitely going to be a strength. Okay. Don't rely solely on VR referrals. Make sure you're developing multiple recruitment pathways. I'm obviously a big advocate of that VR partnership, but in the same breath, I will also say that it's really good to make sure you're working with other community resources as well. VR can be a great referral source. They can be a great partner for resources and funding, but you never want to, as a CIL, kind of rely solely on that. There are smaller community partners. There are other organizations. There are other family resource centers. There are other nonprofits that have similar mission-driven work. These are all people that you need to create relationships and pathways with so that you can make sure you're serving a wide variety of people. You want to make sure you collaborate with schools to identify those skill gaps that you see on an IEP. So that's another reason that we talk about that intimate relationship to have with teachers, to know their name, to visit their school, to go into the classroom, to talk with them about individual students and ask, what are you seeing in the classroom? What is a new barrier that you've seen? If disabilities change, then what's a new accommodation we can try? And then adjusting your programming to adapt to those barriers. Making sure that the services you're providing are going to be creative, they're going to be relevant, and they teach transferable skills. Teamwork, communication, leadership, responsibility, all of those sort of key skills can be taught in a myriad of different ways, a lot of ways that can be a lot more interesting. And then pre-ETS don't have to be traditional. You can be creative and you can individualize as much as possible. Okay. You want to expect barriers, right? There are going to be things that you run into, even if you have the best laid plans. There's going to be things that you did not expect. The more barriers you run into, the more experience that you get figuring out how to get around them. That actually strengthens your program for later iterations. You want to make sure that you have an ear to the ground. You're able to listen to the students you work with, you listen to the consumers you work with when you're developing curriculum. Being able to have a youth with you in the room when you are creating a lesson is incredibly important. That's really going to help you. Not that one youth is going to speak for all youth, but being able to have that unique youth perspective is going to prevent you from investing in creating in a lesson or series of lessons that simply don't land with youth, or even not knowing how to adjust a lesson that in the past has been successful, but now a new generation of youth, they think differently, they expect different things. So keeping that youth perspective in curriculum development is very important. Putting effort into that data collection. No one's favorite part is paperwork. Paperwork is the bane of my existence. But the more data that you can collect, the more data you can organize, it's going to allow you to do two key things. One of those is you're going to be able to see trends. You're going to be able to see what's effective. You're going to be able to see what's working and what's not working. You're also going to be able to have more metrics to pull from when you are applying for more funding. So if you apply for grants, if you're trying to talk about the success of a program, qualitative data is very important, but so is that quantitative piece of being able to see we served this many students, this many reported an increase in skills, this many got jobs, this many were able to reach an independent living goal. Being able to have those numbers at hand is going to help you in the long run. And then another great direct quote that I saw, keep building your program by degrees. Some things will work, others won't. Change, grow, and evolve. That might be my next tattoo. I think that's really good words to live by with these programming. Okay. Did I miss any? No, I didn't. All right. I've been talking for a minute. So I'm going to pause for a sec. And I'm just going to ask if you're available. I know some of you are multitasking, or, but if you can, give me just an emoji. Give me a word in the chat. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs down. How are we feeling overall about this content? Is some of this new? Is some of this kind of regurgitated knowledge that you've already heard? What are we thinking? How are we feeling? Or if you're real bold, you can come off mute.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of thumbs ups and heart emojis on the Zoom, so I think that's a good sign, excuse me. It looks like we got a couple of chats in about people feeling good about the content, a mixture of new and old, excited to learn more. Some is familiar, but good to get a fresh perspective. Pretty solid content and a thumbs up.
Great. Great. Okay. So some of this you already knew. Just good to hear again. Some of it's relatively new. Yeah. Okay. I thought that might be a question, but they might just be off mute for a minute. Okay. So we have a solid chunk of time dedicated to this portion of the webinar. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If you are like me, one of my pet peeves is going to a webinar, and I go to a lot of them, where I don't learn something new, or someone speaks in really big pictures, but they don't actually tell me the nitty-gritty of how to do something. So the next few slides, I've taken some really common questions that we've gotten. If you were part of the last series of webinars, some of these are going to be repeat questions, but these are questions that we have commonly gotten, different barriers that you've seen, and ways that we have found to work around them. If this inspires questions, stop me, interrupt me, throw it in the chat, send me a message, come off mute if you'd like. I really want this space. We're not really going to do a breakout room because I think a lot of the questions that y'all have are actually going to apply to pretty much all the programs that are in the room right now. And also, I really want y'all to have an opportunity to interact and speak with each other, because some of y'all have some really, really great programs. So,
Roy, quick question before you get started. So I see 2 questions in the chat. Do you want to hold the chat questions till we go through the couple of slides, or start with those? What's your preference? I can keep track of them on my end if it's helpful.
I see a question about having VR counselors provide referrals. I do have a slide specifically about that. So I'm gonna talk specifically, well, about the VR relationship. So that's a great one. And then April, you've got a great one in there too. How to build strong relationships with VR. You're tempted to discuss and request assistance, but informed counselors don't have the capacity. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So Megan, if you can just help me remember when we get to VR, there's some great questions about that. Okay.
Sounds
So one of the questions we get is about our curriculum. Can we look at it? Can we see it? I'm very proud of our curriculum. It's been built over the years. It's been built by a combination of young professionals, youth with disabilities, people from education, people from fields wildly outside of education. It's been test driven. It's been adapted. We can't give out our entire curriculum, although I am always happy to talk lessons and activities. But on the screen is a QR code. If you'd like, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to, if I did that right, it'll take you to a PDF you can download that's just an overview of our curriculum. There's also a hyperlink in these slides. I believe Megan sent out those slides to the participants. And if I can get a reminder, I will try and put that link also directly in the chat before we wrap up. But if you are just building your programs, if you thinking about expanding your programs, if you just kind of want to see some of the stuff we're doing, I encourage you, scan that QR code, click that link, just take a look at some of our lesson overviews, our objectives, our reasoning for the lesson. And if anything sounds interesting, shoot me an email, and I will be so happy to talk about any specific lesson. Okay. Look at that. Second one, great minds. Partner support. So how can, oh, thank you, Megan. How can we engage VR and school support for these youth transition programs? This is a tough one. I see April, you're over in Missouri and you had that question. Crystal, we also had that question about getting those direct referrals. I will just be completely frank and say that these relationships can be pretty complicated. Idealistically, they should be pretty straightforward because we are natural partners. The same laws that dictate that a state VR agency exists is the same law that dictates that a Center for Independent Living exists. We are built to be complementary programs from a federal perspective, but that's just not always the reality. And so I always say building an individual relationship with an individual counselor is going to be a really good first step. It depends on how your program is set up. So whether you are the only person in your office delivering youth programming, whether there's just 1 or 2 of you, whether it's you and 2 youth that you're working with, really the easiest lift is just to meet with a counselor who is in your nearest office. So even if you serve the whole state, if you've got a VR office that's, 10 minutes down the road, setting aside time on your calendar to drive over there, maybe call and make an appointment, introduce yourself, hand off some business cards, talk about your vision for youth programming, and see how you can complement each other. This might not result in an immediate collaboration, but getting your name there, letting them know that not only is your CIL a resource, but you as an individual, you as a person, are someone that they can call with questions or concerns. One of the best ways that I market ourselves to local VR partners, before I really talk about our youth programming, is that we fill in the gaps that VR is not allowed to, right? VR or voc rehab agencies, I always defer to the SCVRD that we use here. But those voc rehab agencies are designed to support employment, to find and maintain employment. That's their mission. That's how a lot of them have to answer the phone. And their hands are a little bit tied in that aspect, and that's all that they can do. So I always market myself as a CIL, is that we can do the other stuff, right? We can help a person with those independent living skills, as if outside of employment, right? A VR agency is not going to be able to teach someone how to set an alarm clock so they can get to work on time, but we can do that, right? VR might not always be able to talk about what to wear to work in an appropriate setting, or what's the difference between a boss and a coworker, but people at CILs can do that, right? So being really direct about what a CIL does with an individual VR counselor can be a really good way to get your foot in the door, becoming a personal resource first. And then as your youth programs go, or as you have youth programs and you want to create that bridge to VR, it becomes a little more natural. You can always do this with area supervisors or area client service managers, or however your office is set up. You can always try and go further up that chain. But sometimes more links in that chain don't allow for as direct services. So I always kind of advise just talking to a specific transition counselor. And most of the time, you're going to find somebody who maybe is a little overworked, little underpaid, little overwhelmed at all they have to do. And they're going to look for resources. They're going to be appreciative of that help you can offer. That's the first step in building that relationship in that program. And then also making sure that we are supporting the existing programs they have. So if VR has a specific program, if they do JPI classes, and a CIL member can come in as a guest speaker. If they have a specific youth they're working with that's looking for volunteer opportunities, and that's something that a CIL can provide, finding where you can plug into those existing programs. Making sure that you are capturing all the success stories. So we have a few different ways to capture those successes. We have online forums and different emails and lots of qualitative data that's pulled from the CIL Suite program we'll use. However y'all are set up, making sure that you can write down and capture the individual successes that you encounter, big or small. That's going to help you not only with grant applications, not only with promoting the validity of your services, but honestly, sometimes just getting through the day. Being able to reflect on the hard work that you do and seeing that success is going to be really important. So I want to address those two specific questions. One of them from Crystal was about having VR counselors provide referrals. And I'm assuming you sort of mean, we tend to grow by word of mouth through schools. That's the second part of that question, which is great. Word of mouth is wonderful, never undervalue it. But yes, getting those direct referrals. So Crystal, we were able to do that because VR essentially put out a bid for a contractor to help support their pre-ETS programming, because they know through their federal funding requirements they have to allot a certain amount to pre-ETS services. They also know through their own capacity that they're not able to serve everyone in the state with the amount of personnel they have. So eventually they sent out a contract for bid that we applied for and were rewarded. So we were able to create that official pipeline through that contract. That's not going to be an option for every single person. But I think starting with that individual referral, or excuse me, that individual process where someone knows you specifically, and then there's not really because CILs aren't a corporation, right? We don't have that sort of for-profit status, so we're not going to be entered into a vendor database of VR to look up. But we are a free community resource. And so a lot of times we can be a little less strict with that referral process on our end, which makes it easier for VR to apply. Okay, and then we're going to sail in Missouri. I'd like to know how to build those strong relationships. Yeah. Oh, Laura, that's a great point. Reach more youth. Sales should connect with the elderly population. Some of those youth take care of their grandparents. Yeah, absolutely. Schools are a great place to connect with youth, but youth in the community at large, right? I love that. That's a really unique idea. Because I think this is a big one. What other thoughts do we have on connecting with agencies like Voc Rehab? Well, let me just ask, and I think I've done this in the chat, so if I'm duplicating myself, forgive me. Part of my disability does affect my memory, so how would you rank your connection with Voc Rehab, your CILs connection with Voc Rehab on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being we're BFFs, we go to lunch every day, we plan our outfits, and 1 being barely know her. Oh, okay. So now's the part where y'all aren't gonna like me. I see Donna and Angela are really, they've got some great relationships. Can y'all give a little more context on those relationships, how you got there, how you built that up? If you'd like to come off mute, that'd be great. Or if you want to put it in the chat.
Can you hear? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. I'm actually Amber Harris. Angela, Donna, and I are short staffed and it's a crazy day. So we're having to multitask and I'm having to drive and do this. So I apologize to all. We have a great relationship. However, we know that we need to work together and we know what work needs to be done. But where the lack is the genuine communication, or the knowledge, rather, I should say the knowledge of what each person, each entity rather, is supposed to be doing in the youth transition part. So we have no problem referring people to VR, and then they have no problem referring to us. We finally have been breaking down walls to get into schools, which is huge, especially for us being in such a rural area. However, we struggle with, and this training has been a huge part in telling us what our part is, what their part is. But they're having a restructure over at our local VR. And so where we were making leadway and where this would have really helped take things off, we're going to have to rewind and start building very slowly and small, like a very small capacity rather.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, man, that you've worked so hard to build that relationship, and now you're going to have to rebuild it, but you're not rebuilding it from the ground up. You've laid a baseline, and now it's kind of almost reiterating the relationship. I mean,
Yes, yes. So the good news is one of the key components at our local VR got promoted. But the support staff is what, it was a complete overhaul. Like most everybody is gone. So the main component to wanting to drive the force of the relationship of CILs and VR in her local, counties in our state, and then our, 8 counties that we have, it is huge. But they don't have the support staff now to help at this moment. But we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to pivot just like with anything else, and we're going to figure it out and make it happen.
yes, I love that. It's tough. We have a lot of turnover at our VR offices, and so we're kind of constantly reintroducing ourselves, rebuilding. I mean, re-explaining the contract that they have awarded us. We have to do a lot of education directly with VR, even to just remind them of what they've already agreed to. Not in an antagonistic sense, but just it can tend to be a very big agency.
No, and that's what we're bumping up against is they don't know where their
Yeah.
services begin and end. I know exactly what you're saying. So thank you for saying that. I don't feel alone now.
Yeah. Are there, and that is kind of where the higher up relationships can do really well. So like sometimes we will go to, all the transition counselors have annual or semi-annual meetings with the state office, and we can be invited as a guest speaker to those meetings. So then everybody's captive audience, everybody's there. We get 5 or 10 minutes just to remind everybody what we are. Here's a flyer. Here's what we do. Here's my phone number. Sometimes that can be useful. Not everyone has access to that opportunity though. But yeah, we have, we've built some really great programs, but summer's always busy for us because we're constantly rebuilding them. Even if we're not making new things, we're still rebuilding those relationships constantly. We also happen to be very lucky in that we have staff who are able to mostly dedicate themselves to that. So we have coordinators who can help with that. I hope that at some point, a lot of the CILs on this call, if you're not already, are able to grow into a position where you've got a staff member whose main focus is creating those relationships. I want to jump in because I saw Lauren, is it Meager? I'm probably going to mispronounce last names and first names. But I saw Lauren and Nikki mention that sometimes VR offices can be a little territorial, which it's wonderful that service providers are dedicated to their mission and they really want to make sure that they're serving youth. But sometimes it can feel like a competition. And so one of the ways that we have found we've had to do a little bit of aggressive marketing with that is that we remind them our services as a CIL are unique for 2 reasons. I hate to turn this into a pop quiz, but I have harped on them like 1 billion times. Can anybody guess what I'm going to say? The 2 ways that CIL services are unique. It's okay. I won't hold you.
Am I correct in saying, one, we provide peer counseling services?
Nailed it. Yeah. And Nikki
No.
said lived experience. Yeah, great.
Okay.
5 extra points. Yeah. Consumer rank, consumer driven. Oh, Zoe, that's a great one too. Centers for Independent Living generally don't distinguish between higher or lower support needs. We don't even abide by those categories, right? We focus on advocacy, but it's absolutely, it's that lived experience, right? We are people with disabilities. Our curriculum is created by people with disabilities. It's informed by our lived experience, right? And then that other thing is peers, right? Not only is our curriculum built and driven and facilitated by people with disabilities, it's a lot of times by young people with disabilities, by people that are closer in age and closer in life experience to those students. So while VR does an amazing job, those two factors really make us unique. And if you're able to market a complementary service to VR, to say like, yeah, you're doing self-advocacy, but we also provide this self-advocacy that comes from lived experience, that's facilitated by a person with a disability, that is facilitated by a young person, that most people do see the value in that. And if they have trouble seeing the value in that, then there is some data to back that up too. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and I'll be fully transparent on this question because I know this is a big chunk of what people are looking for, especially on this webinar, is we know that VRs are supposed to be good partners. We know that schools are supposed to be good partners, but it's not as easy as just making a phone call and making a plan, right? It takes time, it takes years, it takes building those personal relationships. We have very successful programs, but honestly, we just ended up renegotiating our contract, which affected the way we provide services. It reduced our scope, right? We kind of had to scramble to move things around. These things definitely happen, but because we have high quality services and because we have those relationships now spread across all of VR, we were able to maintain, and also we've also spent time cultivating relationships with other partners, with other project shirt sites, with family connections, with local agencies, right? So we have diversified enough of our not just income, but also like programmatically, we've diversified enough that our youth programming has a lot of different avenues. So while we know that the main core is going to be VR and CILs and schools, it might end up looking a little different as time goes on. Yeah, partnerships, community partners, community resource meetings have been huge in building those numbers. I love to hear it. Barbara said that in order to know VR counselors, they go to quarterly meetings. And when new counselors are introduced, you talk about your capacity to accept referrals. I love that. I love that. And then, oh, you guys have some great stuff in there. Okay. And then
I keep reading the chat, Troy. Everyone has some great ideas. So if you're not checking out the chat, definitely recommend taking a look there and seeing what some of our other participants are doing in that space.
Yeah, what am I? Oh, there we go. We have
Oh, no, yeah. You're good. Sorry, go ahead.
we have staff members who serve on Vermont State Rehab Counselors. Yeah, Helen, are you able to talk a little bit more about that? I'd love to hear about that.
A little bit. Yeah, I've been serving online for a little while now. It's kind of cool because I don't actually work for VR. I was actually a former program participant there, which is how I found out about the council through through my experience through the programs. And we have people on the board there or on the council who are appointed by the governor, gubernatorial appointed, and we're all kind of interconnected on that front. So Center for Independent Living has to have some form of representation on there. And before I joined our CIL in my state, I had gotten onto the council, so I was there prior, but then I joined my CIL as a peer advocate counselor. But yeah, no, as somewhat of a liaison and a bridge between a couple of those councils, teams, organizations, you get to share a little bit about what's going on, and everyone is looking. Something that I've noticed is that everyone is looking to communicate and wants to know, like, oh, what's going on right now? How can we better support our clients? How can we better support our participants and our peers out in the community who are struggling? And so we will sometimes we'll go over like policies, procedures of voc rehab, be on different subcommittees. There's a peer advocate, or it's an advocacy, outreach, and education committee, like one of the ones I sit on, in addition to being an actual council member too. So I'm not sure specifically what you want to know, but I think it's a very unique position, because even though I'm not an employee of voc rehab, I have that personal experience as a former consumer, and still within like the realm of the CILs too. So I get to occasionally share at like some of those quarterly meetings, like what are some of the goals? What are we interested in right now? What do we want to see more of? And how can we improve those services? Because I think there's always stuff we're working on, trying to figure out, as we all know here.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really unique opportunity, and it's a wonderful opportunity for growth and development within your position, outside of it as well. So I'm sure others on this call are in the same situation, so want to do that as well. But I think it's a really cool opportunity, and really, really admire it too. So yeah.
I love that. Oh man, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, I love doing that. So thanks.
Absolutely. No, having the opportunity to create that kind of bridge between those two is really, I mean, it's really impactful.
Mhm.
And even you're in a very unique position, which I love.
Yeah.
Sometimes even just being on shared advisory boards. So maybe it could be it's a totally separate community project, but there's VR members on there and there's CIL members on there.
Mhm.
We have a rehab counseling program at a university, and we have members from CILs on that program who are graduates, and then members from VR who are graduates. So being on those kind of shared boards or those shared efforts, if you're not able to find that direct common ground through a direct contract, or you're still kind of working your way up to main office connections, just sitting next to somebody
Yeah,
when you're on a shared board is really cool. Ah,
it,
I love
it
that.
really is. Yeah. Thanks. I enjoy it.
It's great. It's great. Um, we have plenty of time, and I know this is a very important topic. I've got a couple of other things, but I want to spend as much time as humanly possible on this connection with VR. Um, does anyone have any specific questions that they'd be vulnerable enough to share, or tips on making that connection, missteps, any kind of unique solution they've found about that connection with VR?
Hi there. My name's Tara. I'm from a CIL in Madison, Wisconsin, and I recently came into the center as the new youth services specialist. And all of the reports I've gotten from everybody is that DVR does not want to work with us, et cetera, et cetera. There's a long history of, not really very good connections. And so I haven't had a lot of support from leadership just due to capacity and the complications there. So I'm in a unique situation, though, that we're hiring a new assistant director right now. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any ideas or suggestions as this new person is onboarding that I could maybe suggest we try as kind of a new front. The current people have been in their roles for quite some time, so I feel like the feelings about DVR are pretty solid. But with this new person coming in, I would love, I know that's exactly what we've been talking about, but if anybody has just a couple like first things to tell the the new AD about it, or just any words of wisdom on that, I would love to have a a good strong suggestion for them as they're coming in.
I love that question. I will say you can definitely talk to them about this really great series of webinars that you just attended through DTAC, and some really interesting briefs and data points you learned that maybe make you reconsider putting effort back into that relationship. I will also say sometimes, and I know everyone knows this, but sometimes when we get the feeling that like the relationship between two agencies doesn't work, it's based on a lot of history, or sometimes it's not even based on that much history. And so I wonder how much of that might be a feeling or a perception, and how much of that is a failed program or a failed bridge that was a one-time gap in services, that people, when pressed, might be willing to rethink. And that sort of, I don't know if that fully addresses exactly what you were saying, but at least from an internal perspective, from your coworkers who are saying, don't waste time, that connection's not going to pan out. Some ideas on lightly challenging that. But I am sure there are some other really awesome ideas I'd love to hear.
Could you actually repeat that question? It was a really good question. I'm sorry. I missed some of it there, but I was just thinking a little bit. So yeah, what was your question again?
Yeah, it was just, as a new assistant director comes into my organization, does anyone have tips about ways to sort of nudge them into helping me build that relationship with DVR, even though in the past it has, I completely agree with Troy's point. It may be sort of outdated feelings about the relationship, and it's worth another try. But I guess just, yeah, nudging leadership to sort of be a partner with me on that, and as an organization as a whole, not just as the youth services specialist. Or, perhaps that is better to approach as the youth services specialist, so that could be kind of helpful there too. So yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, so essentially the question is, if that relationship between the CIL and Voc Rehab is a little poisoned or damaged, how can you challenge people to attempt to rebuild it? And also the way you rephrase that brings up a really great point too, because you wonder, is this something that you can really, as an entire Center for Independent Living, can you really rethink that relationship and reach across multiple aisles to rebuild this? Or do you want to start small, just the youth programming, just connecting with one local office, one person, and seeing if that is a little less frictionless? Yeah. Crystal had a great comment in the chat about just attending those community resource fairs, visiting other tables, having conversations with VR while they're there. Yeah.
Maybe even having conversations with peers and the participants through the programs as well, like just to get a sense of this is who we're helping here. And so that kind of bounces off of Crystal's wonderful response there too.
Yeah, and it goes back to those strengths of a CIL, right? We are people with disabilities. We are people with lived experience. A lot of times we're young people and we're peers, in a way that VR agencies, they don't always check those boxes. And so just presenting yourself with those identities forward can be really impactful too. Oh, I love it. We are at about 3:15. I had a couple of other slides I just wanted to run through in case they inspired anybody. But if y'all think of any more tips for that question, or if any more questions come to mind, please let me know. And Megan, if I miss anything in the chat and you happen to see it, please let me know.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I don't think anything else to add right now, but yeah, great question. A couple of comments that was a really good question. So thank you for sharing. And go ahead, Troy.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Another question that we commonly get is, how do we ensure steadiness of funds? Just a reminder that programs start small. You can focus on growing those programs simply by tabling, by pushing on social media to get more participants, by doing joint efforts with other community partners. One of the biggest things that we found is to leverage funding from other programs that support existing efforts instead of creating new initiatives. So a lot of times we are able to, our Pre-ETS classes in schools, those services that we offer actually fit what another grant is looking for as well. And so we're able to kind of diversify our funding. Or more recently, we've been able to take the structure of the Pre-ETS classes, the connections that we already have with schools, and even if we're not providing that service through VR because of contract changes, there are other grant avenues that are now looking for a similar service. So we can essentially provide the same style classes to the same group of people, but instead of it being backed by VR, it's now backed by this other grant opportunity. And it's not a heavier lift on us because we're not reinventing the wheel, right? We're doing the same program just as we planned. We're just tapping into a different funding resource. So that was something that I have kind of had to learn, because when I see new grant opportunities, my mind always goes to a cool new program that I've been trying to get off the ground, or this flashy new thing that I want to try. But sometimes it really is best just to save those for different opportunities and use the existing programs you have to tap into that funding. How do you get schools on board if VR is not on board? Because sometimes that triangle, it all relies on each other, right? So just like we would create those relationships with VR counselors, it's the same thing doing it with schools, right? So going in to schools, if you have community connections with teachers, I don't know anybody that doesn't have a sibling or an aunt or an uncle or somebody who's a teacher. So utilizing those community connections that you have, creating that intimate one-on-one relationship, coming into the classroom as a guest speaker, right? Taking the opportunity to meet with a vice principal, using parent connections at schools to try and get your foot in the door. And then also the benefit of marketing your programs to schools as opposed to VR is that VR is generally going to be looking for a very small suite of services. Schools, they're always looking for anti-bullying initiatives. They're looking for how to create a student-led IEP meeting, right? They're looking for ways to improve their work-based learning opportunities, professional trainings for teachers, all of these things that a CIL can plug themselves into that's going to start these relationships. Okay, I would love to hear from the audience on this one too, because one of the best questions, one of my favorites, was what's the favorite activity that you can do, a favorite Pre-ETS activity that you do in classrooms? We have a really fun knowing yourself lesson where people create their own personalized flag that represents their strengths and their interests and their disability. It's really fun. It's really interactive. It's one of the first lessons we do. We do a really fun disability history lesson where we talk about famous people throughout history who have had disabilities. We have to update it every year, and every year I don't know who some of these people are because they're Instagram people or TikTok celebrities. But the youth really enjoy being able to see these influencers and these advocates as they see themselves reflected in disability history. A lot of fun icebreakers or basic games that you see, or if anyone has an education background, a lot of the tools you use in education can easily be adapted for this pre-ETS curriculum. Does anyone have an activity where if they are working with youth, like this is the one activity that they really, really enjoy? It's fun for you to do. It's fun for them to participate in. Anything that you want to share? We do get a question because I talk about disability history. I talk about the role of advocacy in disability. I talk about a lot of subjects that don't always seem to fit neatly into pre-ETS as it's defined. So how do we do it? One of those is just utilizing peer mentors as models, making sure they're in front of the classroom, they're working with youth. Having frank conversations with parents and teachers in the community, kind of rooted in that IL philosophy. I know all of us, once, twice, 100 times a day, depending on how much we interact with the public, kind of have to challenge people's ideas about disability. And so continuing to have those conversations frequently and frankly is a really good way to talk about disability awareness, and then making sure that you've got a working history of disability history, talking about the historical impact of advocates with disabilities. Oh, okay. Y'all have some great activities. I'm into it. I want to look at time as well. How can you assess understanding? Make sure that your objectives on progress monitoring are relevant, that they're achievable. Keep your objectives static. Make them the North Star of your lessons. That way your lessons can kind of weeble and wobble, but they won't fall down. You'll keep that objective as the key point. Be flexible in how you administer progress monitoring, but make sure that your progress monitoring is always tied back to that objective. And make sure that you are reviewing data, you're reviewing surveys, you're reviewing feedback frequently, and you're using that to adjust lessons. Okay, I'm gonna keep this one up, but I'm gonna go to the comments because you guys have some great stuff. All right, Janine said on a sheet of paper, people write get to know you questions. They make a paper airplane out of it. They fly it in the air. Everyone continues picking up planes and flying them around the room. After a while, they pick up one and meet with another person, and they spend 1 to 3 minutes responding to the questions. Love that. Cycle continues till everyone has gotten a few chances to speak to different people. Oh my gosh, love it. I can see the chaos. I can see the teachers wincing. And see a couple of things we can do just to make sure the accessibility is good. But man, I love the kinesthetic elements in there. Lauren says, I did a strengths change activity with strips of paper, and they all wrote 3 of their strengths. Put these pieces of paper together into a chair for them to put up in their classroom as a reminder of their strengths. I love leaving them with a visual reminder. Having like a lesson focused on negotiation. I'm going to choose what's necessary. That's from Crystal. Students have to use their communication and self-advocacy skills to negotiate with peers what is needed to survive on a cruise ship wreck, going on a camping trip. Oh my gosh, that's just like one of the wants and needs lessons that we do. Stranded on desert island, what do you pick? We even evolved that into a full lesson where people had to take on roles and they had to identify other people's strengths to assign them roles. Oh, it's great. I don't know what it is, but young people just love to imagine themselves in disaster scenarios. It's so much fun. So anytime you can, that's great. Okay. We're at 3:25. I will just challenge y'all with everything you have learned from this. I would love to challenge y'all to set one goal, just set one feasible goal for your program. Keep it realistic. Consider your timelines, consider your capacity, but take everything you've learned and challenge yourself to one specific goal. And I would also love to hear from y'all. I'm going to make sure you have my contact information. If you run into problems as you try and reach that goal, if you reach that goal, I'd love to hear it. But I hope some of this was useful. I loved everyone's feedback. I'm going to leave my contact info up. I'm going to pass it over to Megan to close this out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Troy. And yeah, I'm really amazed by all the cool lessons that people have dropped in the chat. I think we can try to save this chat and distribute it with our recording and follow-up materials, because there's been so many great contributions that I don't want those to get lost. But we just want to say thank you so much to all of you for participating in this community. We really hope it was valuable and you had an opportunity to connect not only with Troy, who is an awesome facilitator and expert in this space, but also to connect with each other and learn a little bit more about what all of you are doing and how you can look to build your pre-ETS programs. Troy, if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is the final session and we are so glad that you were able to participate in everything. We did drop a link to our post-community survey in the chat. We really appreciate your feedback, and in some cases it's used to inform future events. So we'd really appreciate if you would be able to fill that out for us, and we'll send it in our follow-up email as well. I think that is about everything, Troy. Just wanted to really extend our gratitude to you for facilitating and to all our participants for really being present and connecting with each other throughout these community sessions. So anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, y'all are wonderful. I appreciated the opportunity to share my 2 cents, but more importantly, to hear from y'all. Y'all are doing such great things. So thanks so much.
Awesome. And that will conclude our session for today. You do have Troy's email in the DTAC mailbox if you need anything else, but we appreciate you being on today and our prior sessions, and we'll send the recording out in the next few days. But thank you, and feel free to drop off as you're ready.
Bye, y'all.